All right, welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak, and it's time we focus on what we are calling Ruto's economy, or what kind of an economy we'll have under President William Ruto. And I want us to start by listening to what he said yesterday during a prayer session that was held at State House to put this into perspective.
As we speak today, we are chained to many debts. 65% of all the taxes we collect, we use to pay debt. That's why I'm asking you to pray for our economy.
You need to pray for Dr. Ruto. The country he has inherited is not a very sweet story. It's a difficult story. Work has to be done. And it's only God's hand that will help him through. It is not easy.
That's the situation as depicted by the president and his deputy. And Honorable Osoro, let me ask you this, because yes, we've heard of figures. 8.56 trillion shillings is the public debt. We are not at a very good place. Well, the credit rating may not be as bad, but there is also the concern amongst Kenyans that if we continue to borrow more, then it becomes troublesome for even the coming years and future generations. What is the actual solution that you see in this coming from the president?
Number one, I really like how the president has started off his journey of the five-year journey, the first 5 years journey, because we believe he's going to do great things in this country that will propel him to the second term by God's grace. And it's indeed true that we're in a very sorry state as a country. I have been privileged to be in several such meetings with His Excellency the President, and the fact that it's repeatedly, plus his deputy, repeatedly telling us or reminding us on the position as a country we are, is simply to make Kenyans understand that even as we set pace for the programs that we have, we really have to tighten our belts. We've got to find all alternative ways to seal loopholes that possibly leak our economy. And one of them, of course, being what you said, external borrowing, which is a bit very expensive. And you've seen him doing a bit of some mitigation measures, things to do with stopping some subsidy, fuel subsidy, and rechanneling the subsidy towards fertilizers and stuff like that, where we, of course, want to raise our economy through farming, of course, making sure that we've got enough stock in terms of food, making sure that, and he's also been on record telling Kenyans to pay taxes, telling Kenyans that now we are all equal. There are Kenyans that, of course, felt they were more equal than others, more important than others, who are not paying taxes and stuff like that. So even as he says that the economy is dilapidated, it is indeed true. But again, he's also reminding us, number one, to pray for this country, which is very important. It's not easy to get a president that reminds you that we've got a supreme being. We've got a supreme God to rely on everything. And the fact that, of course, he believes that God is the leader, is the lead of everything that we do as a country, then, of course, we are in the right trajectory. And besides that, he's also reminded us to pay taxes. He's also stopped a bit of some other things that are affecting this country. And we believe that, in a short while, we'll get it right as a country.
At the moment, Honorable Kaguchia, you have a deficit of 865 billion shillings, and to close it, you have to borrow, whether it's locally or externally. And if you look at the difference between the domestic and external debt, it's almost 50-50, almost at par, based on figures of June 2022. So what are those practical reasons? Because, yes, you may invest in subsidy. It will take time for that season to ripen so that people can harvest. If you say Kenyans need to pay taxes, it takes effort to make sure that that happens. But in the meantime, how do you continue to fix these gaps, knowing that another budget cycle is coming, starting actually, should have started already, September 2022?
Yeah, there are several things that the president has so far insisted on. Number one, when His Excellency the President, William Samoei Ruto, was in New York, you remember he asked the superpowers and the Bretton Woods institutions that have lent us money, IMF, World Bank and such, he has requested them to kind of extend the pandemic debt repayment relief to African countries that bore the blunt of this pandemic. And you know, this pandemic again came from also the countries that lend us money. So he has asked and requested that they extend that period and the relief. And I hope that is done. That is one of the ways that we can get an instant relief as a country, whereby instead of probably repaying back 65% of our debt at the current position, maybe we repay lower than that after maybe restructuring. And of course, where there can be a relief, that would also be good for us. The other thing that the president has also brought forth is the issue of encouraging Kenyans to save. And what the president has said, and I like it, is that so far we have been borrowing from other people's savings. He has put it very clearly that the money we borrow from maybe China and other countries like Japan, America, and any other country, most of that money, we are being lent by people who save in those countries. So you find that all the savings they put together, they lend out to foreign governments. In fact, I was surprised even to learn that some of the major projects that have been undertaken in this country by some of the foreign companies are actually being undertaken by savings from cooperatives in other jurisdictions. So we as Kenyans, hopefully, the government is going to lead us and to help us to start saving much more, so that the government can also borrow from those savings. Instead of borrowing abroad, then the government can borrow locally. That will stimulate the economy. I would also...
At a time, almost 50%, it's 49-point-something% of the public debt is local, it's domestic.
Well, but where are we borrowing from? We are borrowing from the money markets, we are borrowing from the banks, and we are borrowing from high interest rates loans. But if we were to borrow from our own savings, it would probably be a different arrangement altogether that would not hurt the economy. And also, when we have more reserves that we are borrowing from, it means that we are also not crowding out the normal borrowers in Kenya. And I mean, the people who are in the the SMEs in our country. So borrowing from those kind of savings would be better. You see, like money which is in the pension funds and such, if the government was to access those kind of monies, then it's going to help our economy to grow faster. Now, we would also, and this is my opinion, I would advise the government hopefully to give kind of an amnesty to Kenyans who have stashed lots of cash abroad. We have a lot of people in this, not a lot of people, we have a few people in this country who have stashed so much money abroad. And for that reason, first, they don't pay tax as it should be, because sometimes they register companies which operate in Kenya, but they are registered in tax havens away from this continent. So I would ask our government maybe to give some kind of an amnesty to those people who have stashed money away, and to make it easy for them to bring it back to Kenya, maybe without much questioning, so that they can help us to have this money come and stimulate our economy. And that would be a carrot that the government would use.
The origin of that stashing, where is that money out there? Is it from genuine hard work? Or it's the
why I'm talking of an amnesty is because we would look at it as there's some money which goes out there, sometimes for tax avoidance purposes. You find some of the huge multinationals that are operating in Kenya are also owned by some of the stakeholders who are in this country, or shareholders who are in this country, but they have registered them abroad. You have heard of companies being registered in countries like Cayman, others in Mauritius. You have heard of those kind of cases. So for that reason, sometimes you find that so much money is still going back to the other jurisdictions out of this country. So others, again, you know, is money which may have been corrupted out of this country and stashed away in other countries. So once now we allow this to be brought back to Kenya, it would help us as a country to stimulate the economy and to have much more money circulation in the country. And you know, in the past, government has been a bit punitive on this, especially using the money laundering laws. It has almost kind of threatened, or rather tried to work with international governments to try and repatriate this money from abroad to Kenya.
Right.
Now, you see, that is more of the stick part of it. Why don't we now start maybe using a carrot and stick? We entice you to bring back.
That's an interesting conversation you're getting into, that a government can benefit from corruptly acquired wealth to build its economy. But anyway, Honorable Mbui.
I mean, whatever the monies that have been stashed away, and I've said it's of different categories.
Yes, you give it two scenarios.
Yeah,
tax avoidance and then
let it be brought back to Kenya.
Resources.
And of course, the other issue.
No, I'll come back to you, Honorable Kaguchia, but let me hear from Honorable Mbui here, because even as we grapple with this, I mean, these are realities. Whether a country meets to pray, these are realities that we must face. What, in your view, is the solid proposal you've had from the leadership of this country at the moment for the 2 weeks they've been in office, and what do you think as Parliament you must do to be in a position to rescue Kenyans from the challenges that we face economically?
Now, first and foremost, this regime to me looks like an individual who follows another one into a swimming pool, and the first one jumps in at the deep end and can swim, and then they jump in afterwards and they can't swim. That's what seems to be happening. I think the regime has started off really on a bad footing. And I'll say, listening to the president lamenting and complaining, like in every public function, you know, really does not inspire confidence. He seems to be continuing to politic. I think what he needs to do now is to deal with these matters in closed-door meetings with strategists that are able to advise on issues economy. Because every time you go to public and you complain and say, you know, the country has borrowed heavily, you know, we are inheriting a dilapidated economy. But I want to remind Kenyans that the president was almost a de facto co-president from 2013 actually, when most of these debts started being incurred. In fact, the Eurobonds happened during the period when they were very cozy in a relationship with the former president. So I think what we need to do as a country is to start looking at how we can use our expertise. Because we have a lot of financial, you know, experts and economic advisors that can be put together and come up with solutions that can help us. I don't want to begrudge that prayer is important. But you know, when you go for meetings, it's good to start with a prayer and then pray for wisdom so that you can be able to provide solutions. You cannot keep saying that we are praying to God so that He can provide miracles for the country. It's important that we, as Kenyans, take time to figure out, when did the rain start beating us? Why is it to incur these debts? What was the purpose for these debts? How can we be able to mitigate? How can we be able to sort out these problems? So I think it's important that he comes up with a team of strategists, not politicians, because I think the biggest problem is that this regime is surrounded by politicians and people whose only purpose is to give pronouncements that are political in nature. And you know, when I listened to the president talk about savings, I was appalled. And I'll say this, you know, when you keep complaining that Kenyans are saving very little money, you forget that even Kenyans cannot even put food on the table. Many Kenyans can't even put food on the table. And you're complaining that they're not able to save. Now, if you have 100 shillings, are you going to buy food for your children or are you going to save part of it? I think the reality of the dilapidated nature of this economy seems to have missed out from the leadership of this regime. And I think it's a high time that they spend time. Maybe the political leaders that I'm here with, they can go and advise the regime to call a meeting.
They should not listen to politicians.
You know, these ones are the polished ones. The ones who surround. These are the polished ones. When you listen to them, maybe they should go and advise that they put together a team of experts and come and look at this country from a perspective of where we've come from, where we are, and where we are headed. And I think, in my opinion, Sam, I think it is true that the country is really suffering economically, and I think it requires sobriety. It requires now for people to start, dealing with issues and not these side shows and the politicking that continues being there.
You do realize you've not given me an answer to the question I asked, but let's listen to CS Mukurwe-ini on what he said about the state of coffers, public coffers at the moment. Listen.
This country, like any other country, we have a budget projections in terms of how much revenue we're going to raise and our own expenditure. And to some extent, sometimes our expenditure outweighs the revenue we generate. And it's not only Kenya, but world over. And for the last 3 years, for the last 3-4 years, we've never borrowed commercially. When we borrow from the multilateral window, where the interest rate is the average of 0.2% and payable over a 30-40 year period. We think that is concessional, that is sustainable.
All right, and of course, alongside that, he had spoken about the situation that was quoted by some of the political leaders saying that the country has just 93 million shillings in stock, and he said that you generate revenue on a daily basis and you spend revenue on a daily basis. But Honorable Mbui, before I get back to your co-panelist, give me a specific proposal that you think President William Ruto must deploy, or even this current term must deploy, whether it's in Parliament or it's at the executive.
Some I actually gave you a solution. I told you this country is full of experts. And this is a resource that the president can take advantage of. And that's why I said he needs to stop surrounding himself with mere politicians that will keep politicking and put together a team that can be seriously able to advise him on economic issues so that he can be able to start figuring out how to tackle the debt problem. I don't want to give him solutions from this podium. I think he needs to put together his own team and provide solutions. If we were in government, I would be able to give you solutions now. We had our solutions, the Kenyans voted for them. Let them provide the solutions for the country. Otherwise, we'll give them advice here, and then they start shining, and we want to get them out in 5 years.
We're building our country. Honorable Osoro, so then, how are you arriving at these solutions? Because clearly, I mean, everyone knows, even at the election campaigns, these are some of the biggest challenges. Now that it's time to govern, how are you arriving at some of the solutions that must be implemented to resolve these issues?
Thank you very much, Sam. Number one, Honorable Mbui is admittedly saying that he does not have a solution, and his team, Azimio, do not have any solution for this country. In fact, their work is simply to critique, and he's doing that perfectly well. It's been 2 weeks. I'm only, worried that we've got another, I think, 5 years or so. He's got 5 years or so to critique this government. I mean, it's a lot of work to do. Very, very much. So I wish him well. And he's among, I think his work is one of my prayer items, to give God to give him strength so that he can critique more. But having said that, Sam, you've just played something about Honorable Mukurwe-ini, Kathiani's statement in regards to the state of the economy and our coffers and stuff like that. I think Mukurwe-ini is the least person to even talk about the public coffers as at now. And I say that with a lot of respect to him. He served, he's had his term, which was, he's among the people that has brought us to this situation. He's among the people that made sure that we are in this very bad situation as a country. In fact,
also,
not really to undermine him on live TV, but it's on record that his son was also found with $1 million trying to fly out in cash, trying to fly out of.
Honorable Osoro, can you just speak to the issue? Because those allegations you're making, I mean, let's not get into that. Let's just focus on what
exactly. So what I'm trying to say,
you said something that he is to blame for the current situation in the country.
Exactly.
How so, as a policy maker?
As a policy,
I mean, as a policy implementer. Sorry.
As a person who sits at the helm of our treasury. He's been a conveyor belt to all this huge borrowing that has affected us. He's been a conveyor belt to wrong decisions in terms of our expenditure as a country. And he's really not been in the right position, to bring this country in terms of the finances to the right trajectory. The issues of revenue that he's talking about, he's been a conveyor belt to tax evasion, per se. Because there are big fishes in this country and the small ones. There are people who are known not to be paying taxes. That as a person who sits in the treasury, he's been avoiding them. He's been stopping, targeting, or rather running that ministry politically. in regards to the revenue and everything. There are people who are supposed to pay taxes and others who do not pay taxes. And the issues of borrowing, he's actually been the person. You know, what he's trying to do is defending what he's been doing for the past 5 years. You know, in terms of huge government debts, as he said, in terms of wrong choices that they've been making as a cabinet in the past 5 years and stuff like that. So he's not the right person to discuss about our state of the economy.
Oh, fine, you've made your point that he's not the right person, but unfortunately that's the cabinet secretary in charge of national treasury. Who
is exiting, though?
Fine, who is telling us about the state of the coffers and state of the economy. So
what is ideally trying to do is to undermine the current leader's statements, is to undermine His Excellency the President, the Deputy President. By, you know, the Deputy President and His Excellency the President have come out and said, we are in a wrong, our coffers are not looking so good as at now.
So in your opinion...
He is coming out and saying, no, you know, you people, you don't know whatever amount that we receive as revenue, this is how we spend, the statements that you are hearing. I mean, really,
okay, fine, fine. Assuming he is wrong, and KRA tells us that they collect 149.6 billion shillings in the month of August, the highest, I think, for a month. If that is the case, how do you expect this money to be spent ordinarily in government?
Again, you're not getting my point. My point is this. We are collecting about 149 billion shillings. And then you're using a lot of it to pay our debts. That is number one. Number two, for overheads as a country, the wage bill is too high in this country. And we are not able to, you know, development money out of that possibly could be about 10% or thereabout. You know? So we are too low in terms of our ceiling. We are too low in terms of our targets, in terms of collection of revenue. So what we are trying to say, and that is...
You just said too low. I thought we surpassed the target.
No, we don't. What he's saying is simply justifying an imaginary target. We have never surpassed that target.
It's not imaginary.
That is why it's an imaginary
KRA works with that target. In the last financial year that concluded in June, the target, they surpassed the target to the tune of, they were able to collect 2.03 trillion shillings, unless we are setting ourselves lower targets than we should. Not really.
I'm still confining myself to the statement made by Kathiani, because that is what we're discussing. That whatever we collect, we keep on spending every day. But how do we spend it? We spend it through what we've said. Number one, our wage bill is very high.
Okay.
Number two, we use the amount collected wrongly, like what we've been doing, like fuel subsidy, you know, mitigating as a challenge, as a big challenge through Panado, what I will call, as I said last time. Number three, paying government debts. So we are really moving around. It's like borrowing from here. It's like getting this. You're getting 100 shillings, but you're spending 150 shillings. You collect 100 shillings, but you spend, your budget per day is 170 shillings. We are in this problem largely because of some of these policies that have been happening in this country, or rather, propelled by this cabinet minister.
Okay, that's fine, I hear you. Though I thought you spend money based on a budget that has been approved by the House, National Assembly, and the Senate, especially for the division of revenue, but the National Assembly for the sake of the fiscal budget. Let's take a look at some feedback, and then I can listen to Speaker Kaguchia, Honorable Speaker Kaguchia here.
Member of Parliament now.
At Citizen TV, Kenya, Engineer Lazaro, you're saying that we're all aware that the precious regime was, I think you mean the previous regime was Ruto joint ticket. He shall not forever hide in the small bush of handshake, telling Kenyans that prayers will automatically make things move like robots is a sign of desperation. That's in Engineer Lazaro. Lloyd Muto, you say, the God that saw William Ruto through to conquer astronomical political waves when it seems like everything was falling apart is the same God that you'll see him through to resuscitate our economy. God will provide the right discernment and the right people. Kinyo Mushoki, the best way to influence the economy is by changing the level and types of taxes, the extent and composition of spending, and the degree and form of borrowing. So policies on borrowing and taxes, you say. Odongo Rolex, you say that it's clear that President Ruto must concentrate on industrialization, development, and improve agriculture to stabilize food security and increase revenue collection. Failure to do this will continue. We will continue lamenting. Of course, President Ruto was quite big. Finally, I think we have taken that. I was very keen on suggestions on how to even reform or bring reforms to the Kenya Revenue Authority, Honorable Kaguchia. And I'm just wondering, because I think it's time, because Kenyans have done the politicking for quite a long time. It's time that we now focus on solutions instead of just the blame games. So I hear Honorable Osoro here not very happy with the performance of the outgoing regime, and specifically CS Yatani. Honorable Mbui, also not very happy with the start of the new government. You, because you've come from the counties and now you are the National Assembly. What then must we do to be in a position, because it is Parliament that receives the budget policy statement. It is Parliament that interrogates all those proposals from all the ministries and state departments. It is them that go ahead to approve the budget. So how do we make sure that Parliament plays its role so that we don't find ourselves in a bad situation again and start blaming a CS or a president or a cabinet, yet Parliament has a role?
Well, I think first, I really don't want to get drawn into the debate that my friend here, Honorable Mbui, would want us to get into about the blame games and lamenting and all that. But let me put it this way. The president has a duty to inform Kenyans of the status of the economy. The economy of Kenya does not belong to the presidency. It doesn't belong to the president. It belongs to all of us. If we are doing well as a country, it is not just the president, it's all of us. If we are doing badly as a country, it's all of us. The president has a duty to involve every Kenyan. Public participation is a constitutional requirement of Article 10, transparency, accountability, and involvement of all the Kenyans. And here, I would even want to call Kenyans the sovereigns, because the sovereignty or the sovereign power belongs to them. So by the president now opening up to us, for the first time, we have a president who is informing us, and his deputy, they're informing us of the true position of this republic. I think as a country, we must be very proud of this. Because you know very well, for the longest time, the presidents that have been there before have kept reassuring us that everything is okay. But back in our houses, back in our pockets, we are being squeezed very hard. Yet the president keeps on reassuring us that everything is okay, the debt arrangement is okay, and of course, all that reassurance, we don't see it reflecting in our day-to-day lives. So, for the first time, a president who owns up, comes out and tells all the people, good people, things are not as good and as rosy as we keep saying. I do not blame the cabinet secretary, the outgoing cabinet secretary in charge of finance, because he's trying to kind of protect his image. But I would want to listen much more to what the central bank governor is talking about, rather than listen to the cabinet secretary in charge of treasury. If you remember what the central bank governor told us as parliamentarians, he did not say anything different from what the president is saying. He said the economy is in bad shape. He even said, he was bold enough to say that there are even people who've been trying to play games that were played earlier on Goldenberg. You know what used to happen, those claims. And of course, you know, he was addressing mainly this issue of subsidy. We have been treated to very interesting scenarios in the past. Now, the president has come and said, you guys, you're being cheated. Telling you that we are going to subsidize you of this particular consumption item, and then, or consumable. Then after this, we have people claiming billions of shillings for the same, yet the benefit is not as much as we experience on the other side. So, and he says we have to stop this.
And so the role of Parliament?
The president is being honest with the country. Number two, the president has done a very positive thing, and I believe that he will continue doing this. He's called all the parliamentarians, particularly those who are on his side, the Kenya Kwanza, and for 2 days, the president has taken us through the state of the economy. And he has also provided possible solutions. And he has also listened to the parliamentarians, also giving their views, their mind, their thinking, and any possible solution that they might also have. And you see, that involvement tells us that now we have a hands-on president. We have someone who is ready and willing to listen, ready and willing to consult, and also ready and willing to be vulnerable by exposing whatever solutions that he thinks can work for the country. You see, for this country to work, we must bring on board every person. We must bring on board the parliamentarians. We must bring on board the senators. We must bring on board Kenyans, technocrats, and even the,
tell me about
the economic advisors that Honorable Mbui has referred to. We must bring all these people on board. So we as Parliament, we are happy that now we know the status. And so as we are moving forward now, what we are going to be doing is to interrogate every possible solution. And hopefully, we can be able to handle this even in a more informal setup, whereby we all sit and discuss what are the possibles, what can work for this country, what can't work. And you see, once we do that ahead of even the parliamentary sittings, then we will have interrogated properly whatever solutions that are possible in this country. We go through the possible solutions also with experts, with consultants, and then we are able to adopt working solutions for this country. Okay. So what I can assure you is that with a working government, because you can have a government that is not working, our cooperative government, a working government, that we do not have one person issuing directives and guidelines and regulations on their own, things are going to be, I mean, all possibilities are going to be there in this country. So expect Parliament to interrogate whatever the budgetary appropriations and whatever budget is brought to the Assembly. They expect that interrogation. Expect the Parliament to be vocal, to be involved, to be interested, and also to give their input. Now, we expect also...
Just hold on, so that we make progress. I want to hear from you, Honorable Mbui, because you've served, this is your third Parliament, right?
Yes, yes, it is.
Yes, so most of these, the reason why we are where we are, from 1.79 trillion shillings in 2013 April to 8.56 trillion in June 2022, is it has happened during the tenure of yourself as you served in Parliament. And there used to be, PBO was still there, Parliamentary Budget Office. The Budget and Appropriations Committee was still there, chaired by, I think the first time was Tava Musimi, then in the second time it was Kimani Ichung'wah, and later Kanini Kega. So what must change this time round so that Parliament is able to play its role without what has become sort of, you can tell the difference between the executive and legislature, especially on the side of majority?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And first, allow me to just confirm that listening to Honorable Kaguchia, I now am really scared that this country is drowning, because I mean he says that they've already had meetings, and after those meetings the head of state was only heard complaining. I wish he had given the solutions that you're asking us to, but and I want to correct him when he says that for the first time the head of state is actually giving a state of address. It has happened every year. And Osoro was with me in last Parliament. He knows that it is a requirement, a constitutional requirement, for the President to give a State of the Nation address every year and tell Kenyans the reality on the ground about the economy. But some of the issue you've raised of Parliament, I think Parliament does play its role. And let me say, I agree with the Honorable Osoro on the issue of the current CS for Treasury. You know, Parliament even also is involved in setting the debt ceiling. And the CS came to Parliament last time to request for an increase, to raise the debt ceiling from about 6 billion trillion to 9 trillion. And I remember the conversation and the reasons he gave. He said that Kenya had borrowed, and our borrowing was very close to that ceiling, and that he wanted the ceiling raised so that he could borrow money from multilateral lenders and settle very expensive commercial loans that were local. So when Parliament was actually assisting him to raise a debt ceiling, it was in order for us to settle very expensive loans and get cheaper loans, but not to borrow more. So the idea was that you couldn't borrow because you had reached the ceiling.
Yes.
And so we raised the ceiling to 9 trillion. And the next thing you find is he's borrowed up to almost 9 trillion, and he has not settled any of the local commercial loans. So I think the biggest problem we've been having...
You were promised that the amount of debt would remain the same.
Sorry?
You were promised the amount of debt would remain the same.
Yes, actually, that was the purpose for which we raised the debt ceiling from about 5 or 6 trillion to 9. Because he said we've borrowed up to the limit and we need to increase the ceiling, not because we want to borrow more, but to allow ourselves to borrow from multilateral lenders at very low interest rates and longer repayment terms. So that was a very good deal. Parliament accepted, and we debated it, and we said we will accept to raise the debt ceiling. The next thing, he borrows all the way up to 9 trillion. And doesn't settle any of the old loans. So I think the problem is that we've been having a lot of misinformation from from Treasury, and that is, you see, Parliament can only work on the understanding that what is presented to the House, and if the idea is good, then we can support it because we expect that the government will also, fulfill their obligation. Unfortunately, the CS Kathiani has duped Parliament. And that I'm saying because I was involved in that process. He duped Parliament, and that is why we find ourselves where we are. I think the biggest problem is maybe what he needed to have done is to probably advise the reasons behind his borrowing. Not to cheat that he wants to settle loans, but to say he has expenditure that he needs to incur and he doesn't have enough money. Then we would have addressed that.
Honorable Mbui, I'm just struggling with, if someone wants to settle the debt that is existent, and that's why they're asking for a raise of the ceiling, then why raise the ceiling? Because
some will explain this. If your ceiling is at 5 trillion, and you've already borrowed up to 5 trillion, and these loans are very expensive, you can't borrow to settle those loans because you've already reached your ceiling. So you need the ceiling raised so that difference between 5 and 9 is what you can borrow. So you'll be able to borrow 4 trillion, then pay off these old debts that are expensive. So your debt now becomes only about 4 or 5 trillion. But what he did is that when the debt ceiling was raised, he borrowed the extra money but did not settle the old debts, which is what he had said to Parliament that he would do. Okay. So I think the problem is misinformation from Treasury.
All right. Let's listen to something even as you continue to count the days for the new regime. It's day 13. I want you to watch something here that was happening in Kisumu.
Mambo ya msitu. Unajua hii msitu ni ya raia. Si nyinyi ndio mwenye kuchunga msitu? Si nyinyi mnachunga? Si msitu mmechunga miaka yote. Iko waziri alikuja hapo akafunga. Huwezi chukua hata matawi ya kupika. Matawi inaoza. Pale msituni kulikuwa na shamba system. Wananchi wanapewa, wanalima mahindi, wanapalilia miti ikiwa kubwa wanaondoka. Mimi nasema hii serikali ni yenu. Tumetoa order, wananchi wapewe nafasi walime msitu, ndio tuongeze chakula kwa Kenya hii. Sasa iko haja gani kukataza watu kulima mahindi alafu tunaenda kutoa mahindi ng'ambo? Ni ujinga si ujinga? Ni ujinga si ujinga? Kwa hivyo tutatoa ratiba ambaye tutalima kwa msitu bila kuharibu miti, si ndio?
All right, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, first clip, he was closing the music festivals in Kisumu, dancing to the tune, and of course, I think Cabinet Secretary, one Professor George Magoha stands out for me, stands out. Now, to the next conversation about the proposals by the Deputy President on matters to do with Shamba system. And Osoro, let me begin with you, because truly there is that challenge, and the government has already released or dispatched the subsidized fertilizer to different regions of the country. We've been seeing farmers receiving it, quite happy. Others whose season, of course, is midway, they feel that this is not going to be very useful. But to the extent that now we want to get into the forests to grow our acreage that is under cultivation, how was this decision made, if you know? Because he says that we have given an order.
No, I think His Excellency, the Deputy President, might have been caught out of context in terms of the definition, my own understanding. I think the Deputy President was talking about the food shortage in this country. And my understanding is that we'll go every height to make sure that we've got enough food reserve in this country. We'll go every level to make sure that we've got enough, enough food, and we will support. We'll go to whatever extent to support our farmers in regard to the food production. I did not really get his line of thinking about encroaching our forests, but from my understanding, his definition of the Shamba system is what used to happen during the Mbui era, that at the periphery of the forests, in then days, farmers were allowed, of course the people who used to live around that area were allowed to, to farm just beneath the forest, just around the forest then. Unlike now, what is happening, of course, you can't find yourself within, I think they say it is about, did they say 500 meters within, just from the forest, within 500 meters from the forest, you are not supposed to be found close to that area. So what the Deputy President is talking about, from my understanding, number one, is to support the farmers to whatever level to make sure that we've got enough food security in this country. Number two is to talk about the food reserve. We'll go whatever heights to make sure that that happens. Of course, going forward, I do not expect that one to be what I'll call, because the Deputy President does not have powers to give executive orders. I believe it's the thinking of the government that they'll go an extra mile, of course, to sit down with the experts, to sit down with the relevant authorities, the relevant stakeholders in terms of the environment and stuff like that, to be advised on what extent those very farmers will be allowed.
You surprised me, Honorable Osoro, because the Deputy President said we have issued an order that Kenyans be allowed to do farming in the forest so that we can increase food production in this country. We just had him say that.
No.
Now you're telling me that he doesn't have the powers to say.
I was actually privileged to be with the Deputy President then in the entire weekend. And besides what you see in public, is one person really who loves forests, who loves the environment, who loves our,
I don't have a problem with that. I'm just asking based on what we had him say.
Because what he said is that and I think that statement might have been picked out of context, because I really believe that what the Deputy President is saying is that to some extent, there are forests that farmers would be allowed, just like the Mbui system then, to cultivate or to farm at least closer to the forest. And you remember what he said? That there is an earlier statement within that, where he said that farmers...
You're revising the
There's something he also said, but you're only focusing on one line. But there's something that he said, that people are even being denied at a Matawi. There's a statement of about even Matawi. That what we've been seeing around, there has been an excessive use of security agencies to even chase the neighborhood from even getting some firewood from from our forests.
Honorable Osoro, stop moving from the question. Is there something you want to tell me?
Something I want to tell you is this.
Yes.
There are measures that are already being taken in place by this government, engaging the stakeholders about advisory on how farmers can be allowed to at least get closer. There are some lands. I want you to go to Mau. Instead of planting trees, I don't know why Honorable Mbui is very happy with that statement. Instead of planting trees, land has been left there in, and not just Mau, several forests around this country. That there is a massive land that is idle, that is not in use. The forestry department is not planting trees, but they are calling it forest land.
So what is the solution there?
So the point is this. Stakeholders are going, of course, to be engaged. Are you going to plant the trees there to have our forest back, or you allow these farmers to plant maize so that you get enough food in this country?
Okay.
So those are the discussion. That is the discussion that is there. But I want to confirm to you that there is no, ideally, there is no, plan by this government to affect, or rather to deforest our...
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Honorable Mbui, you've been laughing all through. Why?
No, I think...
I'll get to you, Honorable Kaguchia. Let's first hear from...
Sam, I can see the Honorable Osoro is at pains, at serious pains to defend the Deputy President's comment. He's even changed what the Deputy President said. Yet he spoke in black and white, and we all heard. But and maybe he might there might be some forest in his constituency that could be making him think the way he is. And I also have a forest called Katunga in part of Iveti Hills in Kathiani. So I do know what the deputy president said is really a difficult and a tall order. But on that matter, if you allow me to comment on it, I think my own observation is the manner in which this was stated. And I've said this, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but if you listen to the deputy president when he spoke, he still sounded like he was on the campaign trail. Two things that stand out for me, even forget the environmental impact and all that, but one, that this was a function which had school children, because it was a music festival, the closure of the music festival.
No.
Those are two separate events. Yeah. The first one,
the comment he made was elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yes, it was at the funeral of the deputy governor of Baringo. I
was going to have issued, some other comment beyond that. But anyway, having noted that, still, and I'll say this because my concern is the kind of comments that leaders make. So even if it wasn't in the music festival with the children, it still was on national TV and the children had it. What did he say? He actually blasted the current office holder, who is a CS for forestry. And he said that, and these were his exact words, that not allowing people into the forest is foolishness. And he used the words ujinga. And he said, hiyo ni ujinga ama sio ujinga. Now, I mean, an insult of that
wait,
level.
I think the ujinga is in the question of importing food, yet we have learned that we are not tilling.
Yeah, but the issue is that, but because, and the reason is because people are not being allowed to get into the forest. Because the issue was, if we allowed people into the forest, then we would not have this problem. So whoever said that we cannot access the forest and do farming in the forest made a decision which was foolish. That is basically the idea.
Okay.
And so my concern is the language that he used. I think he needs to be able to cultivate palatable language, especially when addressing matters of national concern. Not to forget that also, I mean, clearly, the Article 10 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 is very clear about things to do with public participation. I think the Honorable Kaguchia here has actually alluded to it. And so before you can make serious resolutions in public forums in the manner in which he did, I think there's need for further consultation. There are environmental experts that we can talk to. We also have to ask ourselves, these decisions were made for people to be pushed out of the forest. What informed that decision? Because there must be clear reasons why this happened. Most likely it was the abuse and the soil erosion and deforestation that occurred as a result of allowing people into the forest. So I think the deputy president needs to be careful that before he utters some of these roadside declarations, he ensures that there's proper discussion.
Okay.
And then Honorable Osoro has tried to say that he doesn't have the powers. But I heard him loud and clear, and if you repeat that clip here, everyone can hear. He said we have ordered that Kenyans can get back into the forest. Those are the things that we are saying. I think power needs not to get...
Though he also said that they'll come up with a ratba on how exactly to do it.
But he did say that he has ordered Kenyans to go back. Okay. So I think, for me, I think it's important that they do further engagements and consultations before making those declarations.
Honorable Kaguchia, you come from a region that has quite a forest and also the home of... Noble Laureate, the late Wangari Maathai, sorry, and was very vocal some 13 years ago, stating why people should not invade, is it Kamai Forest, to go and do the Shamba system of farming. So how are decisions made in this government? Because already there has been quite a number of declarations that we are ordering the DCI officers to go back to Kiambu Road. We have given an order that farmers be allowed into forests. That the work, and you'll be listening to that clip shortly, that the work of dealing with cattle wrestling is work of Rigathi Gachagua. How are decisions being made in this administration, and what are your thoughts about allowing people to farm in the forests?
Well, I think first let me start by passing my very sincere condolences to His Excellency, the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, after having lost his brother, Kathiani, a gentleman I know very well, and had a an interaction with him recently when we were also arresting the other brother in Madeira constituency. My very sincere condolences to His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua. Well, I think one of the challenges we have is you have asked Honorable Mbui here to comment on that statement, but clearly if you listen to him, you realize that he has not listened to that clip. He may not have interacted with it earlier on, and maybe the clip you have played here was rather short. So he was not able to make proper judgment of that clip, you know, the depth and the breadth of it. If you listen to what the Honorable His Excellency, the Deputy President said, he said that trees are very interesting because a tree has a way of chasing you away when it grows. I don't know whether you heard that comment. Yeah? He said a tree has a way of chasing you away when it grows. And by that, what he meant is, if you are farming on forest land and the tree has now grown and has become of age, your maize will not grow there again in that particular tree, I mean, under that tree. So you'll have to exit. So basically, what the gentleman was talking about, His Excellency, the Deputy President, is there's idle land that has been, or that was left after trees were cut down. I have, for example, in Odaya, there's a small hill which is called Karima Hill, which is forested and which is under the KFS. But if you look at it, it looks like a small cape, almost like a pop's cape, because most of the part of the head of that hill is no longer forested. So the forest cover is only at a small part in that particular hill. And all these other part which is not forested, one would ask, is it right for the people around that area to go and plant trees or to be assisted to plant trees in that area which is not forested anymore? And as they cultivate, or as they help these trees to come up, they also cultivate some kind of food crops in the meantime. And then he goes ahead to say, once these trees grow, then automatically you're also ejected out of the forest, because then you cannot be able to continue planting. What does that mean? It means you're not being told to go and plant maize under the trees. So where the area is forested, you cannot go and farm there. But where the area is clearly not forested, it was deforested, trees were cut down, and even though it is forest area, and if you look at, let's say like Mau, if you look at large parts of Rift Valley where we have forest land, but there are no trees, they were cut down. So would it be right or would it be wrong to allow a person to go and plant maize and plant trees also, or even assist them to plant trees and plant maize, and then they continue cultivating the two of them together? Do
you think that's the biggest problem farmers are facing? Is it the lack of land, that to the extent that now you have to get into forest to look for land? Or it's just our policies in identifying arable land that is lying idle?
Well, there is still a challenge, both ways. And arable land is there and is identified already. Probably what we need to do is to irrigate it so that it is arable throughout the year. But also, normally the land that is around the forest is not only arable, but it also happens to be a little bit more wet throughout the year. So it is a land that you can sometimes farm more often, maybe in and out of season throughout the year. So that's why sometimes that kind of land could be enticing. But again, as we are doing that, yeah, it is enticing to adding the food crop and adding the harvest into the country. Now, having said that, I would concur
Let me play a clip, then I give an opportunity to respond to this, because it's related to what I just asked you.
I hope you'll come back to me.
Yes.
Okay.
Listen.
Mupatie sisi nafasi tuweke katibu wa interior ambaye ako na haja ya kufanyia wananchi kazi, na tufanye mabadiliko hapa na pale ya vitengo za usalama. Hii kazi dogodogo ya wizi ya ng'ombe na nini, hiyo ni kazi ya Rigathi Gachagua. Hiyo hapana kazi ya rais. Hii maneno ya bolea, Kuna ingine meli mbili imekwama Mombasa. Mimi nikilaki rais naenda huko kukwamua ikuje. Najua meli za vitu vingine ndio iko mbele, ya bolea iko nyuma. Nitaenda nipitishe ile ya bolea kwanza ikuwe pale mbele. Kwa sababu tukisaidia mkulima, bei ya unga itateremuka.
So, Speaker Kaguchia, the question I asked you is, how are decisions being made in this administration? Because when you listen to him, he is very confident about what he's saying, and these are decisions that appear to have already been made. But how do you decide that hii kazi ni ndogo, ni yangu, I will go and make meli ambayo iko nyuma ikuje mbele, we want DCI back to Kiambu Road, we want farmers to be allowed to farm, is it near the forest or inside the forest, depending on whether you listen to Osoro yourself? How are decisions being made?
Well, I wanted to say that in terms of the whole issue of Shamba system, if you like to call it that way, although I do not also think that is exactly what the Deputy President was alluding to, but the whole of that issue is a policy issue, which I'm sure once we have a cabinet secretary in charge of environment, we'll be able to have a sitting and come up with a proper and coordinated policy, which the Deputy President also alluded to. So on the issues that the Deputy President has raised, I think he's coming out as a gentleman who is raring to work. He's coming out as a gentleman who is energetic. He's coming out as a gentleman who is focused and interested. He's concerned. And he wants to work. He wants to be involved. He wants to get work done. He wants things done faster. That's basically how he's coming out. And I think that's a good thing. It's a positive thing. It's a good start. And we need to encourage him to be able to take those bold steps and bold moves ahead. For example, even offering himself to help the president to tackle this insecurity issue. You know, the insecurity issue can be a bit controversial sometimes in Rift Valley, particularly when you look at the Pokots versus the others. The issue of arming and disarming can be a hot potato. It can be political. And basically what he's saying is that leave the president out of this. I'm ready personally to pay the political cost as a person now to help our president solve this matter.
Yet the president is the chair of the National Security Council.
That is it, and assisted and deputized by although on security, no. Yeah, it is okay. On the Security Council is not deputized or is not helped or is not. But this is an issue which is specific in that area, which the Deputy President says and offers himself even to chair a security committee in that locality, which would help his boss to resolve that matter. So give it to him. The Deputy President, where he is now, and he's starting to work, he's removing his gloves and he's saying, I'm ready, I am willing, I am interested, and I am committed, I am focused, I am energetic, I am passionate. Okay. Give me the opportunity. I think
I hear you, Honorable Kaguchia,
that's how we take it.
Because you're out of time. Honorable Osoro, again on the same point about how decisions are made, and I get the point that he says that ready to work, ready to go, but the process is as important as the decision.
That is true. Still on the issue of Shamba system, I think it's very important for me again to continue explaining myself on it further. You know, Shamba system was banned in 2003, by the way. And because, again, it had been misused a little bit over time. And I think there are mitigation measures, if it's allowed again, not to be misused in future. And we've got so much land that is gazetted as forest land across this country. So much land. But when you go there, you don't see a forest. I mean, you visit those sites, you visit those counties. I mean, you are told this is forest land, but there is no forest. There are no trees. There is nothing. But you can't, it's no man's land because it's idle. The villagers around that area cannot, cultivate anything, even sukuma wiki or anything. Yet it's unused, it's unutilized. People are not encouraged to even plant trees for purposes, of course, of now making it a forest as it should be. So what ideally, again, the Deputy President is saying is that these people around such areas that are gazetted as forest, without trees, be allowed, number one, to plant trees. Number two, as the trees grow, as the trees, of course, as they plant the trees across those land, or that particular land, they also cultivate, or rather plant maize per se, or whatever meal they may want, as they do that. Number one, it is more or less like, it's more or less like a joint venture between government and the commoners. Now, of course, they'll be doing that all through 3 months or 4 months. They get their maize, again they plant, as the trees continue growing. Again, as Honorable Kaguchia said, along the way, of course, the trees will overshadow maize plantation, and the people, of course, will move out. What he's saying...
You don't see any threat of human interference with the forest?
I don't see. In any case, actually, there is no forest. It is simply helping the forest grow.
I'm just saying, because you see you're limiting yourself to areas that are forest land but not planted. But the Deputy President did not get into those specifics.
If you listen to him carefully,
he just said,
he's simply saying it's more or less like a short-term solution for now, for purposes of getting our food reserve, full.
Okay.
He said they'll eventually move out. Now, the issue of decisions that you've asked, that there should be decisions, of course, an expanded network of decisions. I don't think a person of the Deputy President's caliber can pronounce himself publicly without engaging his boss. That is the President of the Republic of Kenya. As things stand right now, of course, we do not have a cabinet,
So you think these are issues that have discussed between the two? I
really believe that they are well informed. If Kenyans can keenly sit down and listen to His Excellency Deputy President, they'll understand from where he sits. He is a person on a mission. Okay. He's a person who is passionate on changing, the status of the economy of this country and so many things about this country. He may appear to some of the people abrasive. He may appear abrasive, but trust me, he has good intention for this country.
I hear you. Honorable Mbui, your final word so that I can take feedback here.
I think the era of roadside declarations is back in the person of the Deputy President. I think he's overworking, and really overworking to create confusion. When the President is in United Nations, talking about the environment, he's here encouraging deforestation. When the President is complaining about the economic ruin, which can be sorted out by dealing with corruption,
but Mbui,
did
he specifically encourage deforestation?
But the reason why human beings were chased out of the forest, well, that was the reason. Because there was, issues of soil erosion, because for you to cultivate, you keep having to go and till the land. So there's issues to do with soil erosion. There's issues to do with, of course, the fact that when you allow people into the forest, and there's a competition between their food and the trees, and they don't need trees.
So there's likely probable consequences.
Yeah, they'll sacrifice the trees for their own benefit, especially considering the kind of problem we're having with the issues of food. And again, of course, even before the cabinet is named, he's already appointed himself CS for Interior, he's CS for now Transport. I think the Deputy President needs to allow the President to put to set his government and appoint ministers, and then they must also discuss these things before he gets out to the public and issues these kind of declarations.
You think they're not consultative?
I don't think they're consultative, because on that matter of the forest, what he said is flies in the face of the environmental impact. And if he had said that before the President went for that meeting in Unga, the President would have been questioned.
Okay. All right. Let's take a look at some of the feedback you've shared with us. At Citizen TV Kenya, Sam Gituku, the strike to use this at Daybreak or not. Your views are this morning on the different areas that we have touched on. Kenyo Mushoki is saying the proposed chamber system will increase human-wildlife conflict. Economics, dear Osoro Sylvanus, food shortage or insecurity has two aspects, production and distribution. Chamber system must never be brought back. Any right thinker should reject it completely. It's Mwai 001. Shamba system has never brought food security. UDA government should stop populism politics when it comes to matters of national importance. On Rigathi declaration, there's more than meets the eye. Hope our forest will be safe. TG Marigi, we have thousands of idle land in Galana Kulalo. I bet you mean acres or something, which the government has failed to irrigate. Why do they want to take up forests? Kindly educate. Whoa, okay. Chemai is Koril. Honorable Gachagua is right. The Shamba system is the best because most of these forest lands are fertile and it doesn't need fertilizer to grow your crops. So it will be cheaper for us farmers to grow, did you just say crow? To grow the crops, and within some years I would have boosted the economy. Okay. Isaac Muthusi, the Shamba system is a way to a forest land where exotic trees have been cut for timber. Community around a gazetted forest area is entailed to cultivate, or maybe entitled to cultivate crops as they nurture tree seedlings to mature age for about 3 years before they move out. Okay, so those are the views of Kenyans this morning. Quite divided, but clearly it's a matter of public importance. Thank you all, Honorable Sylvanus Osoro, Honorable Robert Mbui, and Honorable John Kaguchia, for making time for us, and wish you well in the coming days. Of course, as you go for the inaugural sitting of Parliament on Thursday, that is expected to be addressed by President William Ruto, so that they can set several issues in motion, including the big question about cabinet and the principal secretaries. Bye for now. My name is Sam Gituku. See you tomorrow.